In this lesson, we're going to analyze the conflict theory as applied to discrimination and prejudice. Refer to pages 9 and 10 in your second study guide, and there's also some very good information in chapter 9 in your textbook. The conflict model is based in part on the argument that prejudice and discrimination is going to reflect the interest of the dominants, the ruling class. As you can notice on page 9 in the study guide, this model argues that prejudice and discrimination have only harmful effects, no real beneficial ones. Through prejudice and discrimination, the dominants seek to protect or to increase their privileges and resources. And by perpetrating prejudices toward and engaging in discriminatory practices against minorities, those who are in control, the ruling classes, the dominants, can accomplish their end of protecting their interests or enhancing or increasing their interests. Now, I want to highlight something that Noel adds to this analysis. You don't have this in your study guide, so I want you to refer to what you see on the screen, and I'll leave it there for a couple of minutes. Notice that Noel highlights three key factors that he argues, as do other conflict-oriented sociologists, will actually contribute to hostility, competition, conflict over the control of valued but limited resources. Take a look at number 1. This can lead to thinking notions of we against us. But just having two groups that are identifiably different is not enough to produce hostility. You have to have 2 and 3 in place as well. If you look at number 2, this in turn is likely to give rise to stereotypes as well as antagonisms, misinterpretations, stereotypes, etc. And look at number 3. If one group is going to benefit by taking advantage of another, and the one group that's going to, again, gain advantages has more power than the other, then you're going to have hostilities, you're going to have misrepresentations of all of the groups involved. These are most likely going to become much more commonplace. And the group with the most power can use it to get exactly what it wants. So when you look at this, Noel more or less suggests that discrimination comes first. Prejudice develops later as a way of justifying that discrimination. Now, there are a number of conflict-oriented models as to discrimination and prejudice. One of these is highlighted in part by the work of Marx and other conflict-focused sociologists. It boils down to the fact that prejudice and discrimination supports a division of labor by creating a split labor market and a reserve labor force. Let's focus on split labor market for just a moment. And you can find some information linked to this at the top of the 10th page of your second study guide. Split labor market essentially implies that minorities are disproportionately pushed into secondary jobs. Now, these are jobs that are low pay, they have few if any benefits, involve highly repetitive tasks, there's little or prestige or status associated with them. They are what you and I would most likely, and most folks would refer to as dead-end jobs. Now, these kinds of jobs, however, ensure that somebody does the dirty work that nobody else really wants to do. And this pattern helps the dominants by providing a cheap source of labor. Further, competition for these low-paying, low-position jobs will often pit minority workers against each other and low-income white workers against minority workers. This encourages division as well as antagonisms between and among these categories of workers. This in turn reduces any threat to the dominants, to those who are controlled, the owners, the employers. And at the same time, it helps to ensure that they get a cheap source of labor. Now, if you go back to the 9th page of the study guide, another conflict-oriented model has several different titles. The colonial model is sometimes also called internal colonialism. If you'll notice on page 9 of your study guide, it's going to occur we're really talking about colonialism that takes place within a nation as it expands its borders or its territories. As it expands outward, incorporates new lands, it also takes control of any native folks who are living there. They're just involuntarily incorporated into this expanding nation. They become conquered peoples. As a result, their native cultures are attacked. They come to be viewed or considered as inferior. And they're either forced to assimilate, that is to say, made to be more civilized, or they're subjected to forced isolation. For example, in the 19th and 20th centuries, the U.S. and Canadian governments, assisted by religious organizations and through philanthropic groups and individuals, created what is loosely referred to as the boarding school system, whereby children were forcibly removed from their parents and sent to boarding schools, where they were systematically stripped of their native cultures, including religious beliefs and languages. This is a photograph of one such Native American young man. I have no idea what his native name was, but sometime thereafter he became Thomas More. This is another set of photographs, 3 Lakota boys, when they arrived at the Carlisle Indian School and sometime thereafter. Now, as a result of being put into such a situation, being stripped of your culture, being forcibly assimilated, as a result, these folks are kept out of the economic and political mainstream. They're oppressed psychologically as well as socially. And in the United States, beyond Native Americans, there are other ethnic categories that you might be able to identify. Can you pick up on any of them? There were Mexicans as well as Spanish who were living in many parts of the Southwest when it was incorporated, that whole area was incorporated as the result of the Mexican War into the United States. If you go to Alaska, there were Native Alaskans who were forcibly assimilated, and then in the Pacific, Native Hawaiians. Now, Marx approached this from a somewhat different angle. Take a look at page 10 in your study guide. Now, I've given you some information there in a brief form about the so-called Marxist or exploitation model of discrimination and prejudice. Marx himself saw prejudice and discrimination literally built into the capitalistic economy because he saw 2 categories competing for the same thing: workers and owners. Okay, what were they after? Money. And this puts them in a competitive situation, generating a lot of conflict. Now, according to the arguments that Marx made, the last thing the owners wanted was for the workers to become unified, organized, if you will. There are a lot more of them than there are owners. Once unified, organized, they could shut the whole operation down as such. So literally, according to Marx, the owners worked to keep the employees disorganized. Now, there are numerous examples of where power on the part of the owners and their allies weakened labor movements. one that comes to my mind, 1946, the Great Oakland Strike. The two combatants were the Retail Merchants Association, a very powerful but deeply anti-union business organization, and this included department store owners who employed primarily women. The women belonged to Specialty Store Employees Union, Local 1265. And they went on a month-long strike that, for all intents and purposes, pretty much shut down the city of Oakland. But the power of the owners, their allies, and anti-union organizations and movements, in the end kind of broke the strike. And as a result of this strike, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed in 1947, which substantially weakened the nation's labor movement. But as Marx envisioned it, going back to what you see noted here, his argument was that the owners of capital would try to employ any technique or procedure they could, including prejudice and discrimination, to keep the workers disorganized. By way of an illustration, between 1910 and 1920, all white labor unions struck major U.S. employers in meatpacking, railroad, aluminum, and steel. The owners responded by employing racial antagonisms to break the strikes. To be precise, they employed some deception. They tapped into, notice on the 10th page of your study guide, the reserve labor force, large numbers of African Americans living in the South, promising them great jobs up north, come on up. Well, large numbers migrated to the north only to learn that they were going to be strike breakers. They were never told that was going to be their roles. Plus, they ended up being paid much less than the striking white workers, and they were not permitted to join unions. This effectively broke the strike. White workers returned to basically the same conditions they had left, and in some cases, even worse. Most African American employees lost their jobs. The few that remained in their jobs found they were working at low-paying jobs and they were non-union. Now, at the same time, you want to bear in mind that Marx made the argument that in addition to the reserve labor force, owners would employ existing prejudices. The idea behind this is let's divide the workforce specifically along gender, age, race, and ethnic lines. Now, don't get the impression that the owners just got together in a smoke-filled room and decided to do this because they were evil. But rather they saw a chance to, again, weaken the position of the workers by doing just that. And the argument being, in the end, well, who do the workers blame for their problems? Well, they're going to turn on one another. They won't develop a class consciousness, an awareness that, hey, we're all in this same boat together and we're being taken advantage of. So once again, when you look at how Marx perceives of this, he sees discrimination and prejudice supporting a division of labor, but at the same time, he sees, by and large, those in control, the elites, the dominants, literally again working to exploit employees. One way to do this, employ existing prejudices and discrimination. Play them off against one another. Divide and conquer, if you will. Now, the policy implications of this approach are pretty straightforward. Power differences between dominants and the general population have to be reduced. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at how sociologists using the symbolic interactions perspective analyze discrimination and prejudice.